I want to thank Carol Lotz and Karen Mitchell for providing the music today. We're continuing with our Who You Are series, guiding ourselves to listen to that spiritual message about who we are spiritually as individuals so that we can grow and thrive in all aspects of our lives. And this week, we're talking about we can change the world. We can change the world by being all that we can be. When I stepped into ministerial school, it was to become a minister and to give credibility to this Center for Abundant Living that I wanted to start somewhere in Oregon, because at the time I lived there for about 30 years. And I had great plans all drawn up and ready to build. A center was going to be for retreats, and people could come there and learn to experience their abundance and figure out how to be abundant in all areas of their lives. And so my idea of being a minister was to be the head of this retreat center. And then I went to a retreat for the ministers in our area. And at the retreat, the dean asked us to consider that God might have a plan for us bigger than we had, so that we could be even greater than we could be. And could we just consider that something greater was in store for us? Well, I cried. I didn't want to give up my dream. And I knew that I was the exception to the rule, of course. I was certain that my ministry was all about having this teaching center for abundant living. Well, here I am in Baton Rouge, and I've spent the last 8 years building up this Center for Spiritual Living in Southeast Louisiana, and being a pulpit minister, which was also not my plan, and creating this community that's radically inclusive spiritual renegades who truly do heal hearts. And they have opened my heart to how we can really change the world if we just listen to God's plan and realize that sometimes what we're planning isn't what the divine had in mind. So I'm going to finish that story in a little bit, but let's not get too far into the conversation today before we have the question for the week. So the question for this week is this: what's the one choice that you can do or be so you always come from a place of remembering that you can change the world one person and one action at a time? So one more time. What's the one choice that you can do or be so you can always come from a place of remembering that you can change the world one person and one action at a time? Because what I know to be the truth for each person on this planet is that we are where God shows up. We can change the world by being all that we can be. Each one of us is this individualized expression of an infinite being, an infinite consciousness. God is in us, through us, as us. And you hear me say that a lot. And that's evidenced by our divine inheritance. We're all endowed with all the qualities that are part of what we think of as God. The love, the peace, the grace, the freedom, the joy, the wisdom. I could do the whole talk just in talking the qualities of God that live within us. It's important that each of us know that we have unique gifts. And our gifts are necessary and needed components for this world to be the best that it can be. Let me repeat that. Your unique gift is a needed and necessary component for this world to be the great world that it could be. I used to spend hours up in the hospital with my son, and there was usually a common area where there was this big, huge puzzle. And since my son loved doing puzzles, we would go down to the common area and we'd work on it together. And often we'd get really to the end of the puzzle, and guess what? We'd be disappointed because there'd be 1, 2, 3, maybe 4 pieces missing because someone wanted to be the last one to finish the puzzle. My point here is that life is a lot like that for each of us. Each person is a piece of the puzzle in this marvelous tapestry of life that the divine has created. And if even one of us isn't part of that tapestry, the puzzle is missing something. It doesn't feel quite whole and complete. We live in a world of 7.8 billion people. I looked it up this week. Just a few years ago, it was 7.2. So what do we have to offer that 7.8 billion people might need? And the question might seem overwhelming. What can one person do? Because we might feel that we're insignificant in that 7.8 billion people. But what you need to remember is that there is only one you. And you're the only you in the entire world, in the entire planet. You'll always be the only you. No one will ever be on this planet exactly as you. So nobody can do, give, or be what it is that's yours to do, give, and be to this planet. You're a unique piece of that puzzle of life. Each one of us is a unique expression of God's artistry. God is in us, through us, and as us. And without even one of us, a piece of that magnificent tapestry is missing. Think about that for a minute. You're part of this tapestry. We've talked about that before. If even one thread in the tapestry is not there, it's incomplete. But you're the only one in the planet that has your makeup, your skills, your style of doing things, your background, your talents, your history, your gifts, your sphere of influence, the people that you know that you can influence. You're the only one that is you. And God, knowing itself as you, is the way you're part of that masterpiece. And your job to change the world is to be the vision. Allow God's wisdom to support you to live by bringing you, all of who you are, into manifestation. I heard this phrase, vision without action is fantasy, and action without vision is chaos. And it really struck me. And what it meant to me was that for peace and healing of the world, it's essential that we don't edit or censor who we've come here to be. We like to do that. Oh, she could do that. She's much better at whatever. And we give up on part of what our dream is. But you can be the necessary healing part that's needed by just aligning with God, by being the living embodiment of what is crucial in the world for you to give. And what's crucial in the world for all of us to give right now is love. When we think about it, each of us is irreplaceable. So if we were kind and promoted the wonder that's in our hearts, every person would actually bring forth their unique genius and find expression in that. In Karen's song right before the talk, she said, I can cry about my life, or I can laugh about my life. But remember, the whole point of the song was, whatever the question, love is the answer. Whatever the question, love is the answer. I would say that each of us hit the mega jackpot when we look at the love and the light that we are within ourselves. What do you plan to do with your incredible inheritance? With that prosperity, which, by the way, can never be depleted. Nobody can ever take away the fact that you are a unique expression of the divine. And you might feel sometimes like your prosperity is depleted in certain ways, because right now the world feels full of dis-ease. And certainly there seems to be a lot of uncertainty about what comes in the future. The important thing is that we don't let fear rule. That we don't let fear force us to make choices that are not about love. That we allow that still small voice within us to guide us to do what's ours to do, what's ours to contribute on this planet. That we allow Spirit to take charge. We are eternally supported by a power for good. Catherine of Siena said this: "Be who God meant you to be, and you will set the world on fire." I just love that. Be who God meant you to be, and you will set the world on fire. Believe it and share that. It's done to you through you. So take who you're meant to be out into the world and set the world on fire. So when we take an orange and squeeze it, we all know that what comes out is orange juice. And if we took some grapes and pressed them, what we would get is grape juice. Now, true, we take grapes sometimes and turn them into various qualities of wonderful wine. But what I want you to know is that it's what's inside that counts. So what's inside of you? Ernest Holmes, in Practical Application of Science of Mind, said this: "There is an irresistible, universal, and divine urge within us to be happy, to be whole, and to express the fullness of life." An irresistible urge. So what's inside of you? The quote goes on: "The latent divinity within us stirs our imagination, and because of its insistent demand, impels and compels our growth. It's back of every invention. It proclaims itself through every creative endeavor. It has produced sages, saints, saviors, and will, when permitted, create a new world in which war, poverty, sickness, and famine will disappear." Wow. What kind of a world would that possibly feel like living in? And to change the world, we have to embrace that we can make a difference. John F. Kennedy said that one person can make a difference and everyone should try. And the idea that one person can impact many lives certainly may start to make sense when we think of people like Mother Teresa or Martin Luther King, Nelson Mandela, Thomas Edison, Albert Einstein, Leonardo da Vinci, Beethoven, Mozart, Aristotle, Michelangelo, Princess Diana, and let's not forget Chief Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Those are just to mention a few. I personally want to take just a second here to thank Chief Justice Ginsburg for all that she did for this country to bring forth equality. And she believed she could make a difference. When she graduated at the top of her class at Columbia, she couldn't get a job because she was a woman and she had a small child. She didn't give up. Thank goodness she didn't give up. Thank goodness that she believed that she could make a difference. So I'm grateful to her tenacity and for all that she's done for this country to bring forth change that was absolutely necessary. She said that real change, enduring change, happens one step at a time. She also said to fight for the things that you care about, but do it in a way that you lead others to join you. Do it in a way that you lead others to join you. She knew she could make a difference. The question is, do you believe that you can make a difference? If the answer is no, why not? We are the place where God shows up, each one of us. So why do you not think that you could make a difference? You might not be Chief Justice Ginsburg. However, you will never know till you step up and contribute what is yours to bring to this planet. Edward Hale said this: "I'm the only one, but still I am one. I can't do everything, but still I can do something. Because I cannot do everything, I will not refuse to do the something that I can do. Because I cannot do everything, I will not refuse to do the something that I can do. Now that is very important when we think about, can we make a difference? One morning this man was sitting in his living room and he was looking out along the beach, and he noticed that the waves were washing up all of these starfish and they were being left on the sand. Well, in case you don't know it, starfishes can't survive on the sand. And he just noticed that there were so many of them out there dying in the baking sun. He was disturbed about this situation, and when he started walking, taking a walk on the beach, he stared down and he was just shaking his head, and he was noticing that so many of these starfish were dying. And he looked up, and a little ways down the beach was this woman. And she was, one by one, picking up starfish and throwing them back into the ocean, giving them as big a toss as she could. Finally, the man caught up to her and he said, "You can't do it. There are too many. You'll never get them all. It won't help. The waves are just going to bring in more of them." The determined woman picked up another one and threw it out as far as she could. And she said, "Well, I made a difference for that one." So we might not be able to make as big a difference as we think we might like to, but the obvious point is you have to believe that you can make a difference, at least for some of the people on this planet, or some of the things on this planet that, like the starfish. The guy didn't believe he could help, and so he did nothing. The woman believed she could help, and she made a difference to those starfish that she was able to throw back into the ocean. We need to believe that we can make a difference. We need to realize that we're here to do what is ours to do, and that God has many greater things in store for us than we can possibly imagine. When we're children, I think we believe that. We think that we can conquer the world. We have all of these wonderful thoughts about what our life is going to look like. And then our rational minds start telling us as we get to adult to limit what we think, to limit what we think is possible. We lose a little bit of faith in what's possible in life. So here are a couple stories about children that did great things. Abigail Lupe was only 10 years old, and she wanted to do something for her great-grandmother who was in a retirement home because it was her 100th birthday. So she put together this little review of songs and dances, and the kids went and performed at the retirement home. As she realized how many people were smiling, she expanded that, and now she runs this little thing called Care Girls, and they go around, they're kids from 8 to 13, and they go around and entertain people at retirement homes. So she's learned how to put faces that are smiling into those retirement homes and give them a little bit of something from Broadway musicals and all the music that they dearly love. And Blair Gooch was an 8-year-old boy, and he happened to see the earthquake in Haiti, and he saw a little boy crying, and he was in a pile of rubble, and he couldn't figure out what he could do, but then he realized that he had a teddy bear. So he engaged his teachers, and they created a school-wide and then a city-wide campaign to send thousands and thousands of teddy bears. And they sent 25,000 teddy bears to the island. And he's since expanded his thought, and now they do book supplies, school supplies, they collect toys for kids that need it. And he has advice for kids that I think is also good for us as adults. It doesn't really matter how small or old you are. If you're young and think you can't make a difference in the world, well, you actually can. So, when one flower blooms, spring awakens everywhere. John O'Donohue said that. Last week I talked about Shaki Butner's default mode network, which is a brain system that supports the integration of ourself with the social world. It's also our place of creativity. And the important part of what she said when she was talking about this default mode network is that our creativity wakes up when we're not paying attention to the external world. So that means when we're not on our little devices and we're not glued to the TV. It's only when we become still and calm so we can hear the messages. Listening means being calm, and for me it means settling into my heart. It means getting out of my head and moving that 17 long inches into my heart. Because the truth is, the heart of the matter is that hearts matter. God is love and love is God. And for me, I feel love when I'm resting in my heart. In your reading today, you heard these words. Your outward search for God culminates in the greatest of all possible discoveries, the finding of God at the center of your own being. Love flows up from within you. Love arises in relationships, through connections, through your allowing life, allowing God to flow up from within you. The highest human expression of God is kindness and compassion and love and benevolence and altruism and generosity. Love is the purity of spirit in all of us. So how do you let God flow up from within you? You probably realize that I do have a few suggestions. Bring happiness and joy into other people's lives in your own way, whatever that means. It might mean cooking for them. It might mean taking them out to the park so that they can walk in the park. It doesn't matter. However that is in your own way. Give of your time and resources. I call this being a person of increase. Because when you give of your time and resources, it comes back to you multiplied abundantly. So not only have you gifted the person that you gave your time and resources to, but you get gifted as well. Do anonymous acts of kindness. Let someone in line at the grocery store. You know, I've been standing in line before and I had a big buggy full of stuff, and somebody behind me might have one or two items, and I just say, would you like to go ahead of me? It's amazing how excited people can get about just getting in front of one person. You know, it's just a random act of kindness. Smile. I realize with masks it's harder to see other people smile, but if you smile really big, it starts to show up in the sparkle in your eyes. Okay, so I like to hug, but we can't give actual hugs anymore. So send a text hug or an air hug. Air hug. Listen deeply. You probably aren't surprised that one of the things that a lot of people on this planet crave is to be heard. So give a chance for someone to just be heard. Listen to someone that maybe doesn't get an opportunity to talk to other people, maybe because they live alone. And pray for each person on the planet to find their amazing self. We know that prayer works. The last one, but definitely not the least, is learn to forgive. Not only others, but learn to forgive yourself. Hold nothing in your heart that is hurt, because when we hold hurt in our heart, it's hard for love to flow up from within us. So let go of any hurt, forgive yourself, forgive others, because the more you love, the more accessible you're going to be to love. And when it comes down to it, the reality of this is people don't care what you know. They want to know that you care. In case you didn't get that the first time, let me repeat it. People don't care what you know. They want to know that you care. So tap into the law of love. It's where real change and real reform and real transformation can take place on this planet. Love is the power that can heal this planet. It can heal everything that's going on in our world. Because love doesn't see color, it doesn't see gender or race or culture. It doesn't see differences or separation. And it sees differences as beautiful expressions of God. Beautiful different parts of that artistic tapestry that has been woven by the divine. Love sees the essence of who people are. So let your heartfelt yearning to change the world take on a tangible form. And by the way, my dean used to say, if you have a vision of how you can change the world and it doesn't scare you just a little bit, the vision's probably not big enough. So make your vision big enough that it scares you just a little bit. And when the fear arises, or when something gets squeezed out of you other than like squeezing something out of an orange that's not orange juice, if something gets squeezed out of you that's something other than love, like anger or sadness or frustration or even unkind words, just pay attention to what was going on there. See it as an ability to have a lesson that you can learn. Reframe it. Oh, I see when I'm tired and hungry, I'm a little bit snappy with people. So make sure in the future that you eat regularly and don't get overtired. So what can you do when fear arises? Again, you can pray. I invite you to be gentle with yourself, to love yourself through whatever it is that you just did, or whatever it is that you did yesterday or a week ago. Quit beating yourself up about it. It's in the past. Let it go. Reframe it as a lesson that you learned. And when you see something that's bumping up against your comfort zone, know that it means that new horizons are coming. Isn't that a great thought? New horizons are coming. We all love to sit and watch the sunrise or the sunset. You know, new horizons are coming. It's like watching a sunrise. It brings some joy of what's possible. We don't have to change the world. We only need to change a small part of it. If each one of us changed just a small part of the world, can you imagine the difference that would make? So discover what's yours to do and do it. Because small acts of love can make humongous differences. When people come together in community, or just maybe 2 or 3 of you that have been living in the same household, so you don't have to worry about the COVID thing, when you can form powerful groups, possibilities become endless. And when we get together to let that love flow up from within us, that's the way that mountains are moved. By connecting and seeing our inherent link that binds us, people working together can make a big difference. You know, we see after great tragedies in the world and after natural disasters, how people come together, and it seems like wherever the tragedy was, the world wants to help. Why do we reserve our greatness for times of tragedy and natural disaster? It's an interesting question, isn't it? Why do we reserve our greatness and our generosity and the extra love that we have to give for those times when something has just happened that's saddens us to a great degree? Ernest Holmes in the Beverly Hills Lectures said this: our movement will depend not on a talk such as I'm giving you now. Our evolution, what it will mean to the world, will not depend upon the books we write. It will depend on what we do with it. It will depend on someone knowing enough about it to cause something to happen because of what he knows. When he wants it to happen, where he wants it to happen, in a way it ought to happen, according to his own volition, proving that he is not subject to any whimsical caprice. Our movement doesn't depend upon talks or upon reading books or writing books. It depends upon us doing something in the world, taking this fabulous philosophy of love and acceptance out into the world and demonstrating it. Does that make sense? I mean, it's important that we recognize that it's not about knowing the philosophy, it's about using the philosophy. So I promised to tell you the rest of my ministerial story, and I apologize to those of you that are watching that have already heard it. I was at that retreat and I was feeling very upset about letting go of my dream, because this had been my dream for several years. I mean, when you draw up plans for a retreat center, you know that you're serious about it, right? And I was the exception to this rule, that my plan for who I was supposed to be wasn't big enough, and that God had something even greater in store for me. I knew why I was in ministerial school. And then a few months later, I came down to New Orleans to a convention, and it was in February of 2012. We had a convention where the United Centers for Spiritual Living and the International Centers for Spiritual Living were coming together and uniting finally to be one Center for Spiritual Living. I mean, after all, we both had the same philosophy. Why were we two separate groups? Because we were coming together, there was a booklet that had all the names of the United Centers and the International Centers. And so I flipped through it, looking at the different states, and I got to Louisiana, and there was nothing. Absolutely no Center for Spiritual Living at all. And I went up to the lady and I said, "Did you skip Louisiana? It's not in the book." She says, "No, there's no centers there." There weren't any in Mississippi either. And my heart just began to ache, because I grew up here. I love Louisiana. How could this state not have somebody that had decided to come here and bring this philosophy of love and acceptance to the people that were here? Sure, it was the Bible Belt, and I knew that that was a challenge, but we need this philosophy of love and acceptance even more to heal the hurt of all the guilt from religious beliefs of being a sinner, and you have to let go of all your sins, and if you keep sinning, God's not going to love you. So I was really sad about it, and the day went on, and I went to all of the different events that were going on, and that night I went to bed, and I had this dream that I was a minister in Louisiana. Well, I got up the next day and, of course, told my friends about it and laughed, but I had the same dream the next night. And so I'm still kind of telling people, I wished I could get rid of this dream. It's like I'm starting to dream it every night, and it's not my dream. And the meanwhile, my dean walks by and she said, "I've known that for you for a long time." And I'm thinking, what? So I dreamed it a third night, and finally I said, okay, I will be open to this dream. Just let me quit dreaming it every night. And I flew back to Portland, and I had a CD that was a 6 CD player, and it randomly selected songs. And I got in my car, and Michael Gott was singing Surrender. And I went, okay, I got it. I guess I'm surrendering. And so the Center for Spiritual Living in Southeast Louisiana was born. And it actually happened to be on this exact same weekend in 2012. I chose this weekend because it was my mom's birthday, and also the weekend of the date that my dad died. And I knew that they would both be very proud of me stepping out of my comfort zone and starting a teaching chapter here in Louisiana. And what I believe is that this center has made a difference in lives. That there's more love and more joy in the world because we have come here together. We're radically inclusive, and we are spiritual renegades, and we do heal hearts. And we create community and teach each other and others how to love and how to know that each of us is where God shows up. We just passed the fall solstice, where the leaves are changing color and the temperature is getting a little bit cooler. Plants are stopping to make food, and animals are preparing for a long winter. And the daylight is getting shorter. And so while the world outside is preparing for shorter days, let me advise you to take the longer nights, to have some time when you let go of all of the devices and the TV and just listen to what God may have for you to do, what God has in store for you to do. Our leadership is needed in the world right now. Healing and the change that's required comes from the heart. So we have to stay open and we have to have time to listen so we can hear God's vision for us. Not as a command from above, because that's not what we believe, but as sacred guidance that comes from within, that flows up from within us and points us in the direction of our greatest potential. That booklet at the conference was pointing me in the direction of my greatest potential. That pain that I felt, that Louisiana had no centers for spiritual living, was a message from the divine in the form of a booklet. So challenge yourself this week to remember to think big on your dreams. Think big enough to scare yourself a little bit. Turn whatever is your fear is about that into a masterpiece of a magnificent part of art. And check in each evening and see how you did. Ask yourself, what's the one thing that I can do or be so I always come from a place of remembering that I can change the world? One person and one action at a time. One person, you, and one action at a time. I want to end with these words of Ernest Holmes. They come from Richer Living. Every heart responds to the warmth of love. Every mind yearns for its embrace. And no life is complete without it. Love really is the fulfillment of the law of good. Love alone can heal the world and cause people to live together in unity and in peace. So let's pray. We just take a deep, nourishing breath. And we unite with that divine that is the peace and the love and the understanding and the spiritual guider for each of us. Knowing that each of us has within us the ability to be that love, to be that peace, to be that calm, to be that generosity, that compassion that can make a difference in the world. And what I know to be the truth is that each of us is totally capable of changing the world and making a difference. We don't have to be Chief Ruth Bader Ginsburg. We don't have to be Gandhi. We don't have to be Aristotle. We just have to be all that we can be. So I am knowing that the God without is the God within us. And when we just allow that to flow up from within, that the world is changing. And I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful for the opportunity I've had to be in this community, to be the leader of such wonderful, loving, compassionate, kind people. And it's from all that gratitude that I just release these words into the law of mind, spirit, and action. Because I know the truth, that God does the heavy lifting for us. And God's already called all of this good. So I can just let it be. I can say amen. And we can affirm it together. And so it is. So coming up is our offertory blessing, and I just invite you to sing along with our music team and recognize the flow that happens as the information and the resources and your generosity comes in through the center.